In her previous life, just to hear her childhood friend promise, "I'll take care of you," Lily had personally torn up her application form for the Humanities track. Gritting her teeth, she chose the science track simply to act as his free tutor, staying up day and night to copy notes and summarize study guides to hand-deliver to Ethan. By the time he became the radiant CEO of a tech company, she had withered into a faded housewife. On their 5th wedding anniversary, she watched with her own eyes as he embraced their former class beauty, Madison. Her mother-in-law stood nearby, coldly throwing Madison's pregnancy ultrasound in Lily's face. Pointing a finger right at her, the older woman sneered, "Our family doesn't raise a useless parasite who can't even bear children. You are tacky and worthless, make way for her." That night, in the pouring rain, she was shoved out into the blinding storm by her unfaithful husband. The ear-piercing screech of brakes and glaring headlights tore through the night, washing her foolish youth away into an endless darkness. Hey guys, ever given up your dreams for someone who just used you? Today Lily gets a second chance. Watch her cut off toxic friends, crush her studies, and take back her future. When Lily opened her eyes again, the noisy chatter of a classroom instantly flooded her eardrums. On her desk sat the track selection form for their junior year of high school. Beside her, her childhood friend, Ethan, was frowning, his fingers tapping impatiently on the desk. "Lily, what are you spacing out for? Hurry up and circle the science track. My physics homework is still waiting for you to solve it." That familiar voice, carrying its natural tone of command, made her spine stiffen. Lily slowly raised her head. Ethan's teenage face appeared before her. He lacked the arrogant, successful aura of the 27-year-old traitor he would become, but his innate selfishness was already etched into every feature. He had always been like this, treating her sacrifices like the air he breathed, discarding her without a second thought once she had outlived her usefulness. She looked down at the application form. The terrifying memory of that life-and-death moment in the rain still burned on her skin. Without a word, Lily reached out, grabbed the red pen on the desk, and decisively drew a bold circle around the Humanities track. Her movements were swift and precise. Ethan glared at the glaring red ink, his voice immediately rising and catching the attention of the surrounding classmates. "Are you crazy? Why would you pick Humanities? You know my grades in physics and chemistry have been slipping lately. If you go to the Humanities class, who's going to tutor me?" Lily coldly pulled her gaze from the paper and looked straight into his scowling face. "What do your slipping grades have to do with me? Does your brain grow on my neck?" Ethan froze. He clearly hadn't expected that the usually obedient Lily, who always agreed to his every whim, would dare to speak to him so bluntly. His expression instantly shifted into a mix of anger and condescension. "Lily, what kind of tantrum are you throwing now? So what if I forgot to buy you breakfast yesterday? Do you really need to joke around with your future? Everyone knows it's hard to get a job after graduating from Humanities. Your test scores are at the top of the class. Are you going over there just to ruin your life? Or do you just want to leech off me for the rest of your life?" Lily almost burst out laughing. Leech off him? In her past life, she had stayed up late and woken up early, preparing study guides just so he could get into college. After graduation, she worked 3 jobs at once to fund his startup. Yet, in the end, in the eyes of Ethan and his mother, she was nothing but a useless freeloader. "Ethan, you think way too highly of yourself," she said. Standing up, she began gathering the books on her desk and shoving them into her backpack. "I'm studying Humanities because I like foreign languages. I decide my own future. From today on, do your own homework. Don't bother me with it anymore." After saying that, she picked up her heavy backpack. Without even bothering to glance at his incredibly sour expression, she walked up to the class president, handed in her form, and walked right out of the classroom. As soon as the dismissal bell rang, Lily packed up her things and walked down to her apartment. Just as she opened the door and stepped inside, the smell of chicken soup hit her nose. In the kitchen, Ethan's mother, wearing an apron, was smiling ingratiatingly as she placed a steaming bowl of soup on the table. Lily's mother stood awkwardly beside her, continuously expressing her thanks. "Oh, Lily is home," Ethan's mother said. "I just stewed a pot of chicken soup and made sure to scoop out a big bowl for you to nourish yourself. Here, I heard from my Ethan that you threw a tantrum at school today over something, which is why you demanded to switch to the Humanities track, right?" Lily set her backpack down on a chair and crossed her arms, looking at the woman in front of her. In her previous life, it was this very woman who had instilled toxic ideas into her head, clipping her wings. Without waiting for Lily to answer, Ethan's mother sighed, feigning distress. "Lily, I see you as my own daughter, which is why I'm giving you this honest advice. What good can a girl do studying foreign languages? You can fly high and far, but in the end, you still have to get married and have kids. You'd be better off staying in the science track with Ethan to help him shoulder the burden a bit. Your grades are high, so it would be easy for you to pull his up. Later, when you both get into college, you can choose to study nursing. After graduation, you can work a relaxing job as a nurse, and it will be convenient for you to take care of Ethan and the family's health. Wouldn't that be the perfect peaceful arrangement for everyone? Hearing this, Lily's mother frowned slightly, intending to speak up and defend her, but Lily was one step ahead. She took her wallet out of her backpack, pulled out $100 bill, and threw it right onto the glass table. The sound of the bill landing was soft, but it was enough to make the older woman's fake smile freeze. How much is this bowl of soup? $100 should be enough to buy a whole chicken, right? Lily said coldly. What are you doing, child? I brought this soup out of affection for our years as neighbors. What do you mean by throwing money out here? Ethan's mother raised her voice, her face beginning to turn red with anger. Whether it's neighborly affection or a calculated investment, you know best, Lily said. She took a step forward, her cold gaze fixed directly on the woman. You want me to act as a free tutor for your son. You want me to throw away my own ambitions to study nursing just to serve your family. Well, I'm sorry. Our family doesn't raise a daughter to be a free maid for someone else. Lily's mother stood stunned, her mouth agape as she looked at her. It seemed she had never seen her usually obedient daughter react so fiercely and sharply. Ethan's mother was trembling with rage, pointing a finger at Lily's face. You ungrateful brat! I watched you grow up since you were little and always tried to bring you and Ethan together, yet you dare to speak so disrespectfully. Where did you learn to be so ungrateful? Ungrateful? Lily let out a cold laugh. Over the past 11 years of schooling, from pencils and notebooks to the thousands of hours I spent tutoring Ethan, have you ever paid me a single dime in tuition? You bring over a bowl of leftover soup or a few pieces of cheap fruit every now and then, and you think you can buy my future outright? My mother is gentle and accommodating, and doesn't want to hold these things against you, but I do. Take this $100 bill, and carry your bowl of soup back to nourish your son's brain. From today on, we live our separate lives, and we worry about our own futures. Don't step into my house to preach your morals to me ever again. Caught completely off guard by Lily's words, the woman angrily snatched the bowl of chicken soup and the $100 bill from the table. She stomped out of the house, but before leaving, she didn't forget to hurl a final curse. Let's see if an ungrateful brat studying humanities like you ends up sweeping the streets or waiting tables after graduation. The door slammed shut. Only Lily and her mother remained in the room. Her mother hesitantly approached and gently patted her shoulder. Lily, what's wrong with you today? Are you under too much pressure from your studies? Lily took a deep breath, suppressing the lump forming in her throat. I've made my decision, Mom. I'm going to study in the humanities track. I want to get into Capital University. I want to be a top-tier interpreter. I don't want to live a life that revolves solely around cooking and doing laundry for a man anymore, Lily said. Lily's mother looked at her in silence for a long time. There was astonishment in her eyes, but it gradually softened into understanding and heartache. She wrapped her arms around Lily. All right. As long as this is what you want, your father and I will always support you. Don't pay any mind to what Ethan's mother says. The next morning, Lily carried a heavy stack of books and walked down the third-floor hallway to transfer to the humanities class. She had thrown her science reference books straight into the trash, keeping only the essential materials. As she passed the corner of the stairwell, her vision obscured by the stack of books, she accidentally bumped into someone walking in the opposite direction. The thick Oxford dictionary perched on top slipped from her hands and hit the floor with a thud. Lily frowned slightly and was about to bend down to pick it up, but a pale hand with distinct, prominent knuckles reached out and grabbed the dictionary first. Lily looked up. Standing before her was Caleb, the prodigy and top scholar of the science track, the person who had completely dominated the school's honor roll for the past 2 years. He was wearing a crisp, pristine white uniform shirt. His deep, dark eyes were hidden behind thin, metal-rimmed glasses. His cold, aloof aura always made people too intimidated to approach him. Caleb glanced at the title of the dictionary in his hand, then back at her. He didn't seem the least bit curious or surprised by her messy pile of belongings. Transferring to the humanities track? He asked, his voice low and calm. Lily nodded and reached out to take the book back. Thank you. Caleb let go, slipped both hands into his pockets, and stepped slightly to the side to make way for her. In the moment they brushed past each other, she heard a faint but incredibly clear remark ring in her ear. Smart choice. Lily paused for a beat, turning her head to watch Caleb straight, retreating back as he disappeared around the corner. In this school, where both teachers and parents worship the science track as the ultimate truth, he was the student standing at the very peak of the science department. Yet, he actually praised her decision to switch to humanities as smart. Transferring to the humanities track was indeed the most sober and clear-headed decision she had ever made. The new classroom had a completely different atmosphere. There were no longer any reliant gazes waiting for her to solve their physics homework, nor were there the familiar, bossy demands from Ethan. But storms never easily let go of those trying to change their fate. During the lunch break on the third day after she changed classes, Madison appeared at the door of the Humanities classroom. She wore a school uniform that had been altered to tightly hug her waist, her long hair cascading down her shoulders, holding an expensive cup of boba tea in her hand. Standing right beside her was none other than Ethan. Madison had always been the class beauty of their old science class. In her past life, she constantly played the role of a pure, fragile flower who knew nothing of the world. She used that weak facade to awaken Ethan's protective instincts, inching her way into Lily's life step by step, stealing everything away, and ultimately pushing her to a dead end. Seeing Lily step out of the classroom carrying a stack of workbooks, Madison immediately hurried forward. Her eyes were welling with tears, and her voice was so soft and delicate that it seemed even a passing breeze could knock her over. "Lily, please don't be mad at Ethan anymore, okay? It's all my fault. I've been struggling with some really hard math problems the past few days, so I asked Ethan to explain them to me. You must have seen that, misunderstood, and switched to the humanities class out of anger. Please come back to the science track. I promise I won't ask him to tutor me anymore." She intentionally raised her voice on the key words. Several students walking through the hallway immediately stopped, shooting curious and judgmental looks in their direction. In the eyes of outsiders, Madison was a kind-hearted girl trying to mend a friendship, while Lily was a petty, senselessly jealous person who went as far as treating her own future like a joke. Standing beside her, Ethan's face clearly showed a smug expression. He tilted his chin up and spoke in a patronizing tone. "Did you hear that, Lily? Madison already humbled herself to apologize to you. Don't push your luck. I'll allow you to eat lunch with us today, and we can just let bygones be bygones regarding the past few days. This afternoon, hurry up and fill out the form to transfer back to our class. My chemistry homework has piled up for 3 days now." Lily stopped in her tracks and calmly glanced at the two faces, putting on an act before her. In her previous life, she had suffered because of these deceitful words, blaming herself for not being good enough. Looking back now, she only saw a cheap comedy. She smirked slightly, her cold gaze sweeping over the boba tea in Madison's hand. "Madison, your acting skills are terrible. If you can't squeeze out any tears, don't force it," Lily said. "Ask whoever you want to tutor you. I have no interest in caring about trash. Do you really think I switched tracks because I was jealous of you? Don't flatter yourself." Madison was stunned, her expression of feigned grievance instantly freezing on her face. Ethan immediately took a step forward and shouted angrily, "Lily, watch how you speak. Madison was kind enough to try to talk some sense into you. If you don't appreciate it, fine, but how dare you scold her? You're being completely unreasonable." Lily looked straight into Ethan's eyes and articulated every word clearly. "Then open your ears wide and listen to my reasoning. I switched to the humanities track for my own future. It has absolutely nothing to do with either of you. Ethan, I am not your nanny, and I'm definitely not your homework copying machine. From now on, we go our separate ways. Now move aside and let me through." Having said that, she pushed past them and walked straight down the stairs. She didn't look back, but she could still clearly hear Ethan gritting his teeth and Madison's fake sobbing behind her. He was panicking. He finally realized that she wasn't playing hard to get, she was truly throwing him away. Returning to the classroom, Lily was quickly swept up into a new problem. It was her humanities homeroom teacher, Miss Lawson. Miss Lawson was notorious in the school for being a materialistic teacher who favored the wealthy, looked down on the poor, and was incredibly hungry for fame and profit. Right from the very first homeroom period, she strutted into the classroom with a flashy, designer silk scarf draped around her neck. Her sharp gaze swept over all the students in the class. "A week from now, our school will hold the first monthly exams for junior year. This is a very important exam that will determine the roster for the advanced classes. To help you reinforce your knowledge, I will be hosting advanced tutoring sessions at my private residence this Saturday and Sunday. This class is completely voluntary, but I hope those of you with a strong drive to succeed will attend in full." The word voluntary was heavily emphasized, but everyone understood it was a form of coercion. Not attending Miss Lawson's extra classes meant being targeted and made miserable in class. The majority of the students obediently handed in registration envelopes with cash. When the class president brought the sign-up sheet down to her desk, Lily straightforwardly crossed her own name out. When Miss Lawson received the list back and saw Lily's name crossed off, her expression instantly darkened. She slammed her ruler hard against the desk. "There are some students who just transferred from the science track," she said, "who think they're geniuses just because their entrance exam scores were a little decent. They're so arrogant that they believe they can self-study without a teacher's guidance. Let me tell you, the The scope of humanities is incredibly broad. Without the guidance of an experienced teacher, you will only crash and burn. When that time comes, don't come crying to me to save you. The whole class fell dead silent. Countless stealthy gazes shifted toward Lily. She acted as if she hadn't heard anything, and continued to flip open her world history book. The provocative words of a teacher lacking professional ethics were not enough to distract her. A few days later, Lily discovered the reason why Miss Lawson hated her so much, and it wasn't just because she had refused the extra tutoring classes. Madison, using who knows what excuse, had started frequently visiting Miss Lawson's office. Every time she came, she brought exquisite gift boxes, sometimes high-end cosmetics, other times shopping gift cards. In return, Miss Lawson treated Madison like her star pupil, constantly praising her in front of the other teachers, even though Madison's grades were always lagging at the bottom of the rankings. They quickly formed an alliance. Miss Lawson began to make things difficult for Lily in class. She assigned Lily to sit in the most obscured corner at the back of the room, a spot that was constantly blinded by glaring sunlight and made it hard to see the board. During lessons, she repeatedly called on Lily to stand up and answer trick questions that were entirely outside the textbook curriculum. Lily, why don't you explain to me the root cause of the 1929 economic crisis from the perspective of monetarism? She challenged. Go ahead, you like self-studying, don't you? This question shouldn't be too hard for you, right? Miss Lawson stood with her arms crossed at the podium, sporting a mocking smile. The rest of the students in the class held their breath, waiting to see Lily humiliate herself. Lily stood up calmly, her voice ringing out clearly across the classroom. According to Milton Friedman's monetarist theory, the root cause did not lie in the stock market crash, but rather in the fact that the U.S. Federal Reserve implemented an erroneously tight monetary policy. This reduced the money supply by 1/3, leading to mass bank failures and turning an ordinary recession into a devastating Great Depression. She answered fluently, without stumbling over a single word. The smile on Miss Lawson's lips froze. She hadn't expected Lily to not only be able to answer, but also to accurately cite the economist's name and specific figures. All right, sit down. Don't think you're so great just because you parroted a few lines from a reference book, she snapped, quickly changing the subject. Lily sat down and continued flipping through her book. These childish bullying tactics were truly laughable to someone with the mindset of a 27-year-old adult. The monthly exams quickly arrived. Throughout the 2 days of testing, she completed her exams with absolute peace of mind. The knowledge she had crammed for many consecutive nights, combined with her sharp logical thinking, helped her flawlessly fill out the exam papers. Exactly 1 week later, the results were posted on the bulletin board in the middle of the schoolyard. As Lily walked past the pushing and shoving crowd, before she could even look up at the board, she heard a buzz of discussions. Oh my God! First place in the entire humanities track is Lily. She's 40 points ahead of second place. Didn't she just transfer from the science track? She's ridiculously smart. Where is Madison's rank? She goes to Miss Lawson's tutoring classes every single day. Yikes, rank 150. She's near the very bottom of the track. Lily smiled faintly, turned around, and walked away. This scoreboard was the most painful slap in the face for those who like to use power and money to manipulate others. Right at that moment, she ran into Caleb. He was standing under the shade of a large tree, holding a bottle of mineral water, his calm gaze looking toward the science track's scoreboard. There was no need to guess. Caleb's name was undoubtedly sitting prominently at the very top of the science track rankings once again. Seeing her approach, Caleb raised an eyebrow slightly. First place in the humanities track? Congratulations. You too. First place in the science track, she replied politely. Parent-teacher conferences are next week. Your class's Miss Lawson is notorious for taking advantage of every situation to cause trouble. You should be a bit careful, Caleb reminded her lightly, though a sharp glint flashed in his eyes. He was a man of few words, but he never missed a single development going on in the school. Thanks for the heads up, Lily said. I've already prepared a gift for her. Lily smiled as she walked past him. Caleb didn't ask further, only smirking slightly. On Sunday afternoon, the first parent-teacher conference of the school year took place. The humanities classroom was packed with people. Lily's mother, wearing a simple office outfit, sat neatly in Lily's seat at the back of the class. At the podium, Miss Lawson wore a brand new designer dress, her face carefully made up. Madison's wealthy mother sat at the front desk, draped in gold and jade jewelry, constantly chatting and laughing with the surrounding parents. After announcing the general situation, Miss Lawson began the individual evaluations. Even though Lily ranked first in the entire track, the teacher deliberately skimmed over her name in an incredibly cold manner, then spent a full 15 minutes praising Madison regarding the recent monthly exams. I want to specially commend Madison, Miss, Lawson said. Although her scores aren't truly outstanding yet, she has an incredibly precious learning attitude. She always actively participates in the supplementary tutoring classes and knows how to listen to her teachers. Attitude determines everything. Parents should be proud to have a child like her. Madison's mother laughed loudly, clapping her hands in pride. On the contrary, Miss. Lawson suddenly changed her tone, her gaze darting toward the back of the classroom. There are some students who, despite having high scores, have very problematic attitudes. They isolate themselves, are selfish, lack team spirit, and refuse to participate in the class's enrichment activities. This mindset will sooner or later lead to failure. Families need to reconsider how they educate their children, so as not to let their children become people with talent but no morals. Lily's mother sat there, her hands clasped tightly together. She knew exactly who Miss Lawson was hinting at. The other parents also began to turn around, looking at Lily's mother with scrutinizing eyes. Lily couldn't hold back any longer. Insulting her mother's honor was a red line that she absolutely would not allow anyone to cross. She pushed the door open and walked straight into the classroom. Miss Lawson, she called out loudly, shattering the atmosphere the teacher was trying to orchestrate. Sorry for interrupting you, but since you are bringing up my family's way of educating, I believe I have the right to speak up. Miss Lawson jumped, slamming her hand on the desk. Lily, you are too disrespectful. This is a parent-teacher conference. Who allowed you to intrude? You said I have talent but no morals, that I'm isolated and selfish. Lily stepped forward, her voice clear but full of authority. Then may I ask you, what are your moral standards measured by? By whether or not someone attends extra classes at your private home with exorbitant tuition fees? The entire classroom gasped in astonishment. The parents began to whisper and gossip. Miss Lawson's face instantly turned pale. You are speaking nonsense. Don't you dare slander a teacher. I am not slandering anyone, Lily said. She pulled a pre-printed sheet of paper from her pocket. This is a chart comparing my scores with Madison's. I self-studied, didn't spend a single cent on extra tutoring, and ranked first in the entire track. Madison attends extra classes at your house 3 times a week, paying tuition twice the amount regulated by the Department of Education, and her scores are stuck all the way down at rank 150. You praise the attitude of a poor-performing student just to tear down the achievements of an excellent one. In the end, is it because you care about learning attitudes, or because you care about the thickness of the envelope her parents give you? Shut your mouth. Madison's mother stood up abruptly, pointing her finger right at Lily's face. You dare insult me and the teacher? My daughter studies hard. Our family has money, so I send her to extra tutoring. What does that have to do with a poor, lowly thing like you? It's true that it has nothing to do with me, Lily coldly retorted. But if a teacher uses her power at the podium to suppress students who don't attend her extra classes, turning the classroom into a marketplace to buy and sell grades, then that is the business of all the parents here. Lily turned to face the back of the classroom, looking straight at the bewildered parents. You all work hard to earn money to pay tuition for your children. But if your children's hard work is denied, just because they didn't pay for the homeroom teacher's extra classes, are you really okay with that? Education is not a business transaction, and the report card is not an invoice for Miss Lawson to cash in on. Every word she spoke was like a hammer, smashing directly into the fake glass display that Miss Lawson, Madison, and her wealthy mother had built up. The classroom was silent for a moment before erupting. The parents, who were already dissatisfied with being forced into extra classes, now had an excuse to lash out. They began clamoring, raising their voices to question Miss Lawson. Miss Lawson took a few steps back, her face shifting from pale white to bright red, her mouth stammering, unable to form a word. Madison's wealthy mother was also flustered, slumping back into her chair and no longer daring to speak so boldly. Lily walked straight to the back of the class and took her mother's hand. Her mother's hand was trembling slightly, but the look in her eyes as she looked at Lily was full of pride and unwavering support. After that shocking parent-teacher conference, the atmosphere in the Humanities class completely changed. Miss Lawson was called up by the school board and issued a warning for her coercive tutoring practices. Although she used every excuse to cover it up and managed to keep her position as homeroom teacher, her reputation was severely damaged. The students who had been suppressed by her also began to dare to hold their heads high. But human nature is the hardest thing in the world to change. Miss Lawson didn't reflect on her actions at all. Instead, began to this grudge entirely on Lily. Her opportunity for revenge arrived very quickly. In early November, the Department of Education organized a national English speech and essay writing competition for high school students. The first-place winner would not only receive an honorary trophy, but would also get 20 bonus points added directly to their college entrance exams. For any student, these 20 points were a golden ticket to change their destiny. Each class only had one slot for a direct nomination from the homeroom teacher. Unsurprisingly, Miss Lawson crossed out Lily's name, the person who always scored perfectly in English, and filled in Madison's name on the list instead. The reason she gave in front of the class was utterly ridiculous. Although Lily's written test scores are very high, public speaking requires presence, communication skills, and confidence. Miss Lawson said, Madison comes from a good background, has participated in many extracurricular activities, and her aura is far more outstanding. Our class needs a representative who presents an elegant image, not a bookworm who only knows how to solve test questions. The whole class murmured in dissatisfaction, but no one dared to speak up. Sitting in the front row with her back perfectly straight, Madison gently tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, hiding a smug smile behind a facade of modesty. Lily sat at the back of the class, calmly twirling her pen. They had no idea that this year's competition rules included an open clause. In addition to the teacher's nomination, students had the right to submit their own application to compete in the school round through the Student Affairs Office. Lily had already submitted her draft 3 days ago, but she also knew Madison's true abilities very well. Her English was only at a beginner level. The idea of her standing on a national speech podium was absurd, unless she planned to memorize someone else's essay. So, Lily decided to hand-deliver a juicy piece of bait right to her mouth. Every afternoon after study hall, Lily stayed in the school library's computer lab to type up her essay. Her chosen essay topic was about cultural intersection in the era of globalization. However, she deliberately drafted 2 versions. One was the finalized version submitted to the school. The other version she left open on the screen of computer number 12 whenever she pretended she had to step out to take a phone call. In that draft version, she used a series of complex grammatical structures and archaic British idioms. Especially in the climactic concluding paragraph, she intentionally misused an extremely rare idiom. It was a phrase that, at first glance, seemed to praise greatness, but in an academic dictionary, it actually carried a sarcastic connotation: foolishness and pretentiousness. Anyone without a solid foundational knowledge who relied solely on automatic translation tools would definitely fall into the trap. For 3 consecutive days, Lily noticed Madison lingering around the bookshelves near the computer lab. On the 4th day, when Lily intentionally left her flash drive plugged into the computer and stepped away for about 15 minutes, the data copy icon in the lower right corner of the screen betrayed everything upon her return. Lily leisurely unplugged the flash drive and put it in her pocket. The good show was about to begin. The school-level selection round was held in the main auditorium, attended by all teachers and 11th grade students. The panel of judges consisted of the principal, the head of the English department, and a visiting professor from a prestigious university of foreign languages. The atmosphere in the auditorium was extremely lively. Ethan sat in the science track section, his admiring eyes fixed on the wings of the stage, where Madison was preparing to step out. Ever since Lily had severed ties with him, he seemed to have found great comfort in Madison's feigned weakness. He believed she was a delicate flower in need of his protection, vastly different from Lily's thorniness. When it was time for the Humanities class representative to take the stage, Madison stepped out in a neatly pressed uniform, her face adorned with light, delicate makeup. She smiled confidently, held the microphone, and began her speech. "Distinguished judges, fellow students," she began. It had to be admitted that Madison's family had spent quite a bit of money hiring a crash course pronunciation tutor for her. Her voice was quite smooth, and her articulation was clear. Every single word of the content she delivered was an exact match to the draft Lily had deliberately left on the computer. Sitting in the teacher's row, Miss Lawson nodded along, appearing deeply impressed, while Ethan even clapped enthusiastically after every pause Madison made. As the speech reached its conclusion, Madison raised her voice, her face radiating pride as she fluently read the complex final idiom, firm in her belief that she had just delivered a fatal blow demonstrating her erudition. The entire auditorium burst into thunderous applause, and Miss Lawson actually stood up to cheer for her favorite pupil. The host stepped onto the stage. What an incredibly impressive speech! Next up is the Q&A session. Are there any students who would like to ask Madison a question? Lily calmly stood up from the back row. Among the thousands of seated students, her action instantly drew every gaze. Ethan frowned in disgust, while Miss Lawson glared, gesturing for her to sit down, but Lily ignored them. She took the microphone passed to her and looked straight at Madison standing on stage. A flicker of panic crossed Madison's face, but it was quickly hidden behind a forced smile. "Hello, Madison," Lily spoke up, using extremely fluent English with a precise, sharp tone. "Your speech was very well structured with a rich vocabulary. However, I was particularly impressed by the idiom you used in your conclusion. Could you explain to everyone in this auditorium what that exact phrase means in the context of cultural intersection that you mentioned? Madison's face instantly froze. She gripped the microphone tightly in her hand, her eyes frantically darting to Miss Lawson for help. But as this was an academic question, her homeroom teacher had no authority to answer on her behalf. In the end, Madison stammered, switching back to her native language. I meant the great development and harmony of human culture. Completely wrong, Lily interrupted her loudly and clearly. The entire auditorium fell dead silent. The visiting professor sitting at the judge's table raised an eyebrow slightly, looking highly intrigued. Lily continued, speaking every word clearly, her voice echoing through the speaker system. The idiom you just used carries a sarcastic meaning, aimed at those who try to drape themselves in a cloak of erudition, but are actually hollow and ignorant on the inside. Placing it in a paragraph praising cultural harmony is a fundamental error in academic logic. A person who wrote such an outstanding essay with their own hands would absolutely not fail to understand the meaning of the essay's concluding sentence. Madison took a step back, her legs seemingly unable to stand firm. Tears began to well up in her eyes. Her most familiar weapon was pulled out to be used once again. Lily, don't deliberately use obscure jargon to nitpick at me, just because you're jealous that I was chosen as the class representative. I stayed up all night for several days to write this essay, she sobbed, appearing incredibly wronged. Ethan couldn't hold back anymore. He stood up abruptly from the science track section and loudly scolded, Lily, are you crazy? Can you not stand it when someone is better than you? If you're so great, go up there and give a speech yourself. Don't stand down there taking cheap shots and bullying a weak girl. Miss Lawson also took the opportunity to snatch a microphone from the teacher next to her. Lily, your actions are destroying the school's image. Who allowed you to stand up and cause a disturbance? Leave the auditorium immediately. Facing the relentless attacks, Lily did not flinch. She stood with her back straight, the corners of her lips curling into a cold smile. I am not destroying the school's image. The ones insulting the school's prestige are you and your favorite pupil. Because the essay that Madison just read, from the complex grammatical structures down to the misused idiom at the end, was entirely written by my own hands. Her declaration was like a bomb thrown right into the middle of the auditorium. An uproar erupted fiercely. The principal slammed his hand on the table, demanding order. The visiting professor frowned in dissatisfaction at the chaos. You're speaking nonsense, miss? Lawson screamed, her voice cracking with anger and panic. What proof do you have that it's your essay? You're just trying to ruin what you can't have. Your moral character is absolutely terrible. Madison sobbed loudly on the stage. I didn't steal your essay, Lily. Why would you viciously slander me like this? Right at the moment when Madison's victim act reached its peak, an unexpected incident occurred. The giant projector screen behind Madison suddenly went black, followed by an ear-piercing beep. The entire slide presentation was cut off, replaced by the interface of security camera software. The scene that appeared was incredibly clear. It was the hidden corner of the library's computer lab. The date and time, displayed in bright red in the bottom right corner of the screen, showed it was from just 4 days ago. In the video, Lily stood up from her chair and walked out with a phone pressed to her ear. Almost immediately, Madison sneaked out from behind a bookshelf and rushed over. She looked around shiftily, her trembling hands plugging a pink flash drive into the computer tower, hastily copying the data, then pulling it out and fleeing. The entire process took place in less than 2 minutes, but it was enough to clearly show every feature on her panicked face. The whole auditorium fell into a deathly silence. All sound seemed to be sucked entirely into the video playing on the screen. Madison turned her head to look. The moment she saw the scene of herself being exposed, her legs turned to jelly and she collapsed right on the stage. Her mask of innocent elegance was completely and utterly stripped away in front of thousands of eyes. Lily suddenly turned to look toward the sound and lighting control room located in the corner of the auditorium. The control room door opened, and a tall, slender figure wearing a white uniform stepped out. It was Caleb. He had one hand tucked into his pocket. In his other hand, he held a USB flash drive, walking leisurely down the aisle. His face remained as cold and still as an autumn lake, without a single ripple of emotion. He walked up to the judge's area and placed the flash drive on the table. Mr. Principal, Caleb's deep voice rang out, clear and steady. I am the network administrator for the library's computer lab. That afternoon, I was performing maintenance on the server and accidentally extracted this camera footage. Academic cheating in a national-level competition is unforgivable. To ensure fairness for the students who truly put in the effort, I believe the school needs to review this piece of evidence. Caleb didn't say a single unnecessary word. nor did he step forward to defend Lily emotionally. He used objective truth and undeniable evidence to deliver the most fatal blow. Lily looked at Caleb. He tilted his head slightly and looked back at her through his glasses. Their intersecting gazes carried absolute mutual understanding. He had seen through her trap from the very beginning, and instead of interfering and ruining her plan, he chose to collect the evidence to help her drive the final nail into the coffin of Madison's reputation. Ethan's expression at this moment was indescribably terrible. He stood rooted to the spot, his mouth agape, his eyes full of disbelief mixed with shock as he looked at Madison crying miserably on the stage. The gentle, fragile girl he had defended so vehemently was actually a brazen thief. His intellect and his protectiveness instantly became a foolish joke in front of thousands of people. Miss Lawson completely collapsed. She slumped into her chair, covering her face with both hands. She knew that if her covering up for a cheating student hit the papers, her teaching career would be over. The principal stood up, his face dark with anger. This incident had happened right in front of the visiting professor. The school's reputation had been severely trampled. Disqualify Madison's exam immediately. The principal's voice rang out sternly. Invite her parents to the office. Miss Lawson, prepare to write a self-reflection report detailing the entire process of nominating this student for me. Madison sobbed uncontrollably as two teachers stepped onto the stage and escorted her down. As she walked past Lily, her eyes were filled with resentment mixed with fear. Lily calmly met that gaze. The tears of a villain whose mask had been stripped away never bothered her. The visiting professor finally spoke up slowly. He looked toward Lily and nodded in praise. That humanities student from earlier, your English proficiency is excellent, and your critical thinking is incredibly sharp. Did you register to participate in this qualifying round? Lily smiled and bowed to the professor with extreme confidence. Yes, I did, Professor. My final draft was submitted through the Student Affairs Office. My contestant number is 072. Very good, the professor smiled. I am very much looking forward to your performance. The battle ended quickly and neatly. Lily didn't need to resort to any loud arguments. Madison's dirty little schemes shattered on their own before Lily's intellect and careful preparation. When Lily left the auditorium, the autumn wind blew through the hallway, bringing a refreshing, cool feeling. Caleb was waiting at the door, lightly twirling a ballpoint pen in his hand. Next time you set a trap, remember to find a place without cameras, Caleb said lightly, though a very rare smile flickered at the corners of his lips. If I hadn't deleted the footage showing you intentionally leaving the flash drive behind, people would say you were scheming and cunning. Lily chuckled softly. It turned out this cold-top scholar was so thorough. Thank you, Caleb. I'll remember this favor. No need to remember. Caleb turned and walked away. His tall, lean back blended into the pale sunlight. Focus on your exam. Don't let the humanities track lose to the science track. The incident in the auditorium was like an earthquake sweeping through the entire junior class. Madison called in sick for a whole week. By the time she showed her face at school again, she seemed like a different person. She constantly kept her head down, walking close to the wall to avoid mocking stares. Her facade of a pure, innocent angel had been completely and utterly stripped away. The girls who had once been harmed by her manipulative acts now began to openly boycott her. But the most pathetic person wasn't Madison. The one in a free fall to the bottom of the abyss was Ethan. In her previous life, Ethan had always considered himself a genius of the science track, looking down on Lily's efforts. Yet, he never wanted to admit that behind those sky-high test scores were countless sleepless nights Lily spent compiling exercise types, condensing formulas, and preparing study guides so detailed that even a lazy fool could memorize them. Now, that free pipeline of knowledge had been cut off. He had to swim by himself in the massive, complex sea of advanced physics and chemistry. Midterm exams quickly arrived. This was the truest test of ability. Lily took the exams with intense concentration, tackling each subject with logical thinking and meticulously honed knowledge. On the day the scores were announced, the school's honor roll once again called Lily's name as the valedictorian of the humanities track, leaving the second-place student behind by a safe margin. On the science track's board, Caleb's name still sat prominently in its unrivaled position, immovable by anyone. Lily skimmed down the science track list to find Ethan's name. Not in the top 10. Not in the top 50. All the way down at rank 127 did Ethan's name finally appear, accompanied by a physics score that barely passed the average mark. That very afternoon, just as she carried her backpack out of the school gates, a figure rushed out to block her path. Ethan's eyes were bloodshot, his hair messy, and in his hand, he tightly gripped a crumpled report card. He was panting heavily, glaring at her as if she were his mortal enemy. Lily, are you satisfied? Seeing me this pathetic makes you so happy, doesn't it? Ethan yelled, ignoring the stares of the passing students. Lily took a step back to keep her distance, looking at him coldly. Your grades accurately reflect your abilities. What does that have to do with whether I'm happy or sad? Stop pretending, he gritted his teeth, shoving the report card in her face. It's all because you were selfish and deliberately switched to the humanities track, deliberately stopped copying homework for me, that I fell out of the top 50. You know perfectly well I'm studying for the honors student exam. You doing this is trying to ruin my future. You really are a ruthless, scheming woman. Lily almost burst out laughing at his twisted, ridiculous logic. A parasite who leached off someone else's intellect until it became a habit, now having his supply cut off, turned around and bit the hand that once fed him. So, this was the true nature of the dignified tech CEO from her previous life? How utterly disgusting. She crossed her arms over her chest, her voice clear and sharp as a razor, piercing straight into his fragile ego. Ethan, does your brain grow on my neck? Why should you force me to take responsibility for your grades? I am not your mother, nor am I a teacher paid to tutor you. The fact that I don't help you is a given, not a crime. You dropped in rank because you yourself are incompetent and lazy. Don't blame me to cover up your own uselessness. You? Ethan was left speechless, his face flushing bright red. He had never been so bluntly humiliated by anyone, especially not by her. Someone he always considered beneath him. Just you wait. If my mom finds out about this, she will definitely go over to your house and complain to your mom. Do you think ranking first in the humanities track makes you so great? Studying that useless track, you'll only end up sweeping the streets after graduation. Go ahead and tell your mom to come over. Lily took a half step forward, her aura completely overwhelming. But remember to remind her to bring money to pay off the 11 years of tuition for my tutoring. If you don't have the money, shut your mouth and get out of my sight. She shoved his shoulder aside and strode straight ahead. Her entanglement with Ethan ended right there. He was just a stumbling block on the road that she had kicked into the gutter. Her time was too precious to waste on a loser. To prepare for the college entrance exams next year, she started spending all her free time at the school library. A secluded corner near the third-floor window became her base of operations. It was quiet, had plenty of light, and featured a bookshelf dedicated to history and international politics. But she wasn't the only one who chose this spot. Caleb also frequently appeared there. He always arrived earlier than her, sitting at the opposite desk. On his desk were thick books on mathematics and quantum physics. They didn't say a single word to each other, only occasionally nodding and greeting. There was no awkward flirting, no cheesy, longing gazes. They maintained a deeply understanding silence-a boundary of absolute respect for each other's personal space. But communication between intelligent people always has its own way. One afternoon, she was solving an applied math practice test for the humanities track. The final question, Zephyl probability and statistics, was very trickily planted, forcing her to use a third sheet of scratch paper without finding the shortest approach. She rubbed her temples and let out a soft sigh. Suddenly, a pale yellow sticky note was gently pushed across the desk, stopping right in front of her eyes. Lily looked up. Caleb was still looking down at his book, his expression aloof. His left hand turned a page, while his right hand still held a pen. She looked down at the sticky note. On it were lines of mathematical formulas written in a firm, bold handwriting. There were no lengthy explanations. He merely underlined a crucial variable point that she had missed, accompanied by an arrow pointing toward reverse deductive equation building. With just 3 concise lines, her entire bottleneck was completely cleared. She picked up her pencil, neatly wrote a thank you, and pushed the paper back toward him. Caleb glanced at the paper, the corners of his lips curving into a very faint smile. He flipped the note over, wrote a few more words, and pushed it back. Don't just calculate along the beaten path. Your logical thinking is very good, you just need to be bolder. Caleb's support was always this subtle. He never bossed her around or acted condescending and preachy. Instead, he simply handed her a key to open the door herself. The equality in this communication made her feel incredibly comfortable. In stark contrast to the peace in the library, the school's internal forum was in an uproar. The jealous and bitter ones had never accepted the fact that a student transferring from the science track could crush everyone to rank first in the humanities track. An anonymous post suddenly appeared on the forum with a sensational title, attracting thousands of interactions. The truth behind the humanities track valedictorian. Real talent or backdoor connections. Inside the post, the anonymous poster used insinuating language, using malicious words to smear her. The poster insinuated that she had cheated in the monthly exams, even fabricating a story that she used her looks to seduce the proctors in order to swap her test papers. They used her refusal to attend extra tutoring as an excuse to argue that a self-studying student could never achieve perfect scores in essay-based subjects. Down in the comments section, a slew of other anonymous accounts, most likely Madison and Ethan's friend group, continuously joined in with curses and sarcasm. I knew it. Switching tracks so suddenly, there had to be a scheme. The Humanities track really is a dumping ground that harbors cheaters. So filthy. Boycott Lily. Demand the school investigate the exam room cameras. Lily skimmed through the garbage comments on her phone screen, her heart not rippling in the slightest. In the era of social media, using a keyboard to kill without a blade was the most common and cowardly trick. She was about to turn off her screen and ignore the clowns putting on a show, preparing to head to the Student Affairs office to request camera footage and slap them in the face legally. But before she could do anything, the situation on the forum took a 180-degree turn. A new comment appeared and was immediately pinned to the very top. What was shocking was that this comment did not use an anonymous account. Its owner used a real account with an authenticated IP line in the glaring red text of the school's system administrator. Sender, Caleb. His comment contained no swear words and carried no emotions of anger. Instead, it was cold, sharp, and ruthless, like a scalpel, dissecting the entire ignorance of the mob. First, Lily's scores were graded through 3 independent rounds by the Provincial Teachers Board. No proctor has the authority to interfere with essay-based exams. Second, Lily's self-study time at the library is from 6 p.m. to 11 p.m. every single day, consistently for the past 2 months. If you all spent half the time you used to write anonymous smear posts on this forum to actually solve practice problems, you wouldn't be struggling at the average score mark. Third, the school's network administration system has recorded the IP address of the person who posted this slanderous article. If the post is not taken down within 5 minutes, accompanied by a public apology, the entire file of logs and smear evidence will be sent straight to the principal's office for disciplinary action on the charge of cyberbullying. The weak always try to drag others down into the mud to justify their own laziness. Her scores are higher than all of yours combined. Accept the truth. The entire forum suddenly fell silent. Caleb's prestige in this school was absolute. The words of a prodigy, top scholar, and network administrator carried the weight of 1,000 pounds, smashing all baseless suspicions. The mob of anonymous accounts that had just been banding together to hurl insults instantly clamped up like clams, hastily deleting their comments. Exactly 3 minutes later, the original post was hurriedly taken down by its owner. In its place was a short, disjointed post apologizing to Lily for listening to false rumors. Lily stared intently at her phone screen, her heart suddenly skipping a beat. Caleb's protection wasn't loud or ostentatious. Instead, it struck straight at the core weakness of the opponent. He used logic and the power of truth to stop every spear pointed in her direction. The next day, walking into the library, she saw that Caleb was already sitting in his usual spot. He was frowning, solving a physics problem. Lily walked over, pulled out a chair, and sat down opposite him. She opened her backpack, took out a peach-flavored yogurt, placed it gently on the desk, and pushed it toward him. "A bribe for the network admin," she said softly, the corners of her lips carrying a genuine smile. "Thanks for the comment last night." Caleb stopped writing. He looked up at her. His deep gaze swept over the yogurt cup before resting on her face. "No need for bribes," Caleb said lightly, using the tip of his pen to gently push the yogurt cup back toward her. "But I don't like peach flavor. Next time, change it to black coffee." Lily froze for a second before bursting into laughter. No black coffee. They didn't say another word, diving back into their books, but the atmosphere between the two of them no longer held its initial distance. An invisible bond, built on respect, understanding, and admiration for each other's talents, was gradually forming. The turbulent junior year quickly passed by. Those accustomed to living by leeching off others, like Ethan, or using cunning schemes, like Madison, both brought upon themselves the cruel elimination of the harsh educational environment. They were left behind, sinking into the abyss of inferiority and jealousy. Senior year arrived, bringing suffocating pressure. The schoolyard frictions, Madison's calculating schemes, and Ethan's hostility were all swept away in the brutal whirlwind of the college entrance exams. In this fiercely competitive educational environment, grades were the only voice that carried weight. Lily took root in the library, solving thick test prep books page by page. At the opposite desk, Caleb maintained the terrifying study pace of a true top scholar. Neither of them disturbed the other. They only occasionally exchanged scratch papers, noting concise solutions. The other person's presence became a kind of invisible motivation, pulling them forward together. The 2 days of the college entrance exams took place in an atmosphere so silent that one could clearly hear the sound of pen nibs scratching against paper. When the bell signaling the end of the final subject rang, Lily put her pen down and calmly handed in her test paper. Walking out of the school gates, she saw Ethan leaning against a tree, his face pale white. His hands and feet were trembling as he frantically searched through his scratch papers to compare answers with some male classmates. Seeing her, he hurriedly turned his face away, dodging her gaze like a thief caught red-handed. The confidence of the fake science track genius had completely collapsed. Half a month later, the official exam score inquiry portal opened. Lily sat in front of the computer screen, her hand holding the mouse incredibly steady. The web page loaded slowly due to heavy traffic, but eventually, the red text clearly appeared. Total score 685, provincial valedictorian of the Humanities track. The phone on the desk immediately vibrated. A text message arrived from a familiar number, 715, science track valedictorian. Lily smiled and typed a reply very quickly. 685, see you at Capitol. The other side didn't reply with words, only sending back a handshake, emoji brief, and decisive, heavily bearing Caleb's signature style. Together, they had fulfilled the unspoken promise made on those scratch papers back then. That afternoon, the mailman hand-delivered the bright red admission letter from Capital University right to her. The entire apartment complex was buzzing. A child from their complex getting into the #1 school in the country, and on top of that, being the provincial valedictorian, was completely unprecedented. Neighbors flocked in, packing her family's living room tightly, to offer their congratulations. Her parents smiled so widely they couldn't close their mouths, pride clearly showing in every crinkle around their eyes. Amidst that lively atmosphere, a familiar, shrill voice rang out from the doorway, shattering the joy. "Oh, please, what's all the fuss about being the Humanities valedictorian? It just means she's a bit better at memorizing things than others. After graduation, she'll still end up working as a hired tongue, serving others. It's not like she'll become some big shot." Ethan's mother pushed her way through the crowd, stepping inside with a forced smile on her lips, mixed with unconcealable jealousy. Following closely behind her was Ethan, looking shrunken, his head bowed, not daring to look at anyone. The surrounding neighbors immediately fell silent, exchanging glances. Everyone knew how Ethan used to thump his chest and boast about how great his grades were, but his college entrance exam results were disastrous. He failed to get into all the key universities, ultimately only scraping by to get admitted into a third-rate technical college located way out in the city's suburbs, which had a terrible reputation. Lily's mother dropped her smile and stepped forward, shielding Lily. "What do you mean by that? Our Lily got into Capital University on her own merit. If you don't want to congratulate her, fine, but why say such unpleasant things?" "I'm only speaking the truth," Ethan's mother tilted her chin up, trying to salvage a bit of face. "In the end, what's the point of a girl getting a high education? No matter how modern mindsets are nowadays, girls still have to get married and have children. Studying some nonsense foreign languages or journalism, she'll graduate and earn peanuts. My Ethan might have gotten into a third-rate school, but he's studying software engineering. Boys studying engineering will have an easy time finding jobs as high-paying engineers after graduation. Plenty of girls will be lining up to follow him. So what if your daughter got into Capital? Watch her end up an old maid, or just working as a maid for engineers like my son." Her manipulation and deep-rooted prejudice were acting up again. In her previous life, these exact words had gradually brainwashed Lily, making her devalue herself and obediently crawl into the iron cage called stability, just to serve her son's career. But in this life, Lily's mother no longer held back. She marched straight up and pointed right at the door. "Stop flattering yourself. The era where women studied just to find a good husband is long gone. My daughter got into Capital. In the future, she will stand on international forums and meet outstanding elites. Even if she works for someone else, she'll make a 6-figure salary, holding her head high and supporting herself. That's infinitely better than gritting her teeth to be an unpaid maid for a freeloading man." Ethan's mother's eyes bugged out. She hadn't expected a woman who always kept the peace like Lily's mother to dare scold her right to her face in front of so many people. You are speaking nonsense. Who are you calling a freeloader?" "I'm calling your son that." Lily's father stepped out of the kitchen, his voice deep but incredibly stern. "Do you think we are blind? Over the past 11 years, if it weren't for my daughter staying up night after night to summarize lectures and make study guides for Ethan to copy, would he have even made it into the science track? You took advantage of my girl's kindness, using a few bowls of leftover soup in exchange for a free tutor, in exchange for your son's illusory grades. Now that my daughter isn't carrying him anymore, his true colors are exposed. He only got into some no-name school, yet you still dare to drag your face over here to act superior and lecture us?" The surrounding neighbors began to whisper and point. They had clearly seen everything that had happened over the years. Now that it was ruthlessly exposed by Lily's father, Everyone curled their lips in disdain at Ethan and his mother. Ethan stood hiding behind his mother's back, his face turning from pale white to bright red. He looked up at Lily, his eyes filled with resentment, mixed with a pleading look. He wanted her to speak up and defend him, just like how she had always protected his cheap pride in her previous life. Lily took a step forward, standing beside her parents, and calmly looked straight into his eyes. Ethan, your mother says a girl getting a higher education is useless, and only boys studying engineering can build a successful career. Then listen to me carefully. At Capital University, graduates are welcomed with red carpets and headhunted by multinational corporations. As for your third-rate school, the unemployment rate last year was 60%. Without me as your lifesaver, you can't even solve a basic algebra problem correctly. What right do you have to demand to be a high-paying engineer? Do you think the outside world is just like a high school classroom, where there's always someone readily available for you to copy from and steal credit? Wake up! Lily, don't go too far, Ethan roared, both hands clenched into tight fists. You think you're so great? Without my protection, do you really think you'll be able to live peacefully at that university? Lily burst into laughter, a cold, utterly sarcastic laugh. Protection? You protected me by standing there watching Madison steal my essay and then turning around to curse at me? Your protection is so disgusting that I had to throw it in the trash. From now on, never step foot in my house again. We don't belong to the same world. Ethan's mother was so furious she could barely stand, clutching her chest and panting heavily. She grabbed her son's hand, spat out a crude curse, and trudged straight out of Lily's house amidst the mocking laughter of the neighbors. The door closed, completely severing the doomed relationship from her past life. Ethan and his mother had been pushed into the mud by their own delusions and greed. He would have to taste the feeling of struggling in his own incompetence, watching the people he once looked down upon step over his head to move forward. On a late summer afternoon, Lily arranged to meet Caleb beneath the lush, green canopy of the poinciana trees behind the school library, a place with little foot traffic. He was wearing a simple white t-shirt and black jeans, his tall, lean figure leaning against a tree trunk. Without the pressure of exams, his aura seemed to have lost some of its sharp coldness, replaced by the calm, steady presence of a mature young man. Seeing her approach, Caleb stood up straight. He took a small black velvet box out of his pocket, stepped forward, and handed it to her. College acceptance gift, Caleb said briefly. Lily took the box in surprise and opened the lid. Inside was a matte black metal fountain pen, its design incredibly exquisite and minimalist. On the pen clip, her name, Lily, was engraved in a flowing, yet very strong script. It's beautiful. This pen isn't cheap. Is it really okay for me to accept it? Lily smiled, looking up at him. Not as expensive as the value of the peach-flavored yogurt you gave me, Caleb replied in a light tone, but a remarkably clear glint of amusement shone in the depths of his dark eyes. A good pen is for signing important contracts. When you become an international interpreter in the future, don't use a plastic ballpoint pen. It would be too embarrassing. Lily gently twirled the pen in her hand, feeling the cool touch of the metal against her skin. It was completely different from the empty, unrealistic promises Ethan had made in her past life. Caleb's care was always practical, respectful, and directed straight toward her career. He didn't gift her makeup, and he didn't give her jewelry. He gave her a weapon to step onto the battlefield of the future. Lily lifted her head and looked straight into Caleb's eyes. There were no cheesy, tear-jerking confessions. Between people on the same intellectual frequency, their understanding had surpassed superficial words. Caleb took a half step back, his gaze taking in her entire face. He spoke, his deep, warm tone blending with the rustling leaves. Capital University is very large, he said slowly, every word etching itself into her mind. The science department and the humanities department are separated by a whole large lake, but I hope we will still walk on the same path. His words didn't contain the word love, yet they carried the weight of 1,000 pounds. It was a promise of companionship between two independent individuals, two people who had perfected themselves to stand side by side at the peak, not a weak, parasitic dependence. Lily closed the pen box, the corners of her lips blooming into her brightest smile since her rebirth. Deal. We will walk on the same path together. The summer wind blew through her hair. Lily looked at the outstanding young man in front of her, her heart overflowing with tranquility and unwavering resolve. The dark days of enduring everything for the sake of others had closed forever. The glaring red track transfer form that day was the ticket for her to rewrite the story of her life with her own hands. No more mistakes, no more regrets. 18-year-old Lily was ready to spread her wings and welcome her own vast horizon. 7 years passed in the blink of an eye. Life at Capital University was busy and harsh. enough to crush anyone who only knew how to sit and expect things to be handed to them on a silver platter. But for her, it was a paradise to hone herself. In her senior year of college, she received a full scholarship for a 3-year study program at a top language institute in Europe. The day she held the acceptance letter, she hesitated a little. 3 years of a long-distance relationship was no small challenge for any couple. But Caleb just smiled and personally packed her luggage for her. "Go on. Your sky is out there. I'll be at the research institute waiting for you to come back," he had told her. Their love had no forced sacrifices or suffocating bindings. It was the parallel journey of two independent trees, roots planted deep in the earth, branches reaching high to catch the sunlight. He never asked her to step back and act as his support system behind the scenes, and she didn't need him to abandon his laboratory to chase after her either. Absolute understanding and respect were their strongest foundation. At 25, she returned to the country and officially joined the State Department, becoming a top-tier interpreter specializing in escorting officials at summit conferences. Caleb successfully defended his doctoral dissertation, becoming the youngest scientist at the National Academy of Sciences. While they were steadily conquering the peaks step by step, in some dark, hidden corner of the city, the play of karma and reincarnation was coming to an end. Madison's family went bankrupt. Their counterfeit watch trafficking and financial fraud ring was exposed, and her parents ended up behind bars. No longer having the glamorous facade of a wealthy heiress, no longer having thick envelopes of cash to buy people's favor, Madison revealed her true colors as a hollow, lazy person accustomed to leeching off others. Ethan went on an unstoppable downward spiral. Holding a degree from a third-rate university, with poor skills and an arrogant attitude, he was repeatedly fired from his jobs. It was a massive struggle for him just to get a position as a construction supervisor in a rural province, enduring the harsh elements year-round for a meager salary. The two of them clung to each other in their destitution, ultimately getting married forced by Madison's growing belly. Their married life wasn't rosy like Ethan had once fantasized. Instead, it was an endless string of days drowning in fiery arguments, smashed belongings, and vicious, biting insults. One day, after working on a distant construction site for 6 solid months, Ethan was finally granted leave by the contractor. Looking tanned and weathered, he opened the door and stepped into their cramped, rented room. What hit his eyes was a pile of filthy dishes stacked in the sink, reeking of a sour stench. Meanwhile, Madison was sprawling lazily on the sofa, scrolling through her phone looking at luxury designer goods. "Can't you do a single useful thing while staying at home?" Ethan roared, tossing aside a pile of clothes scattered messily on the table. "I sweat blood and tears at work to send money back for you and the baby, and you just burn it all on this useless garbage?" Madison threw her phone onto the sofa and jumped up, cursing at him. "Do you think you're some CEO? Marrying a useless loser like you is the worst luck of my life. The money you send back isn't even enough to fill the gaps in my teeth, yet you act so high and mighty. Look at Caleb. He drives a luxury car, lives in a mansion, and goes on TV to receive science awards. And what about you? You forced me to hole up in this rundown rented room, making me suffer alongside you, you coward." The name Caleb, combined with a pathetic comparison, acted like a knife stabbing right into the fatal pressure point of Ethan's pride. He lost control. Ethan lunged forward, swinging his arm and shoving Madison hard, making her stumble. "Shut your mouth. What right do you have to compare?" Madison staggered backward. During the scuffle, her heel caught on the leg of the glass coffee table. She collapsed to the floor, both hands tightly clutching her lower abdomen. Her face turned deathly pale from the agonizing cramps. A desperate, gut-wrenching scream echoed through the cramped room. At the county hospital, the nauseating smell of antiseptic assaulted the nose. Ethan sat with his head bowed on the waiting room chairs. A while later, the emergency room doors opened. A middle-aged doctor walked out and removed his mask, his expression extremely grave. "The 3-month-old fetus suffered too severe an impact. The baby is gone. Family members, please go to the counter to pay the hospital fees and complete the admission procedures," the doctor said. Ethan stood rooted to the spot, his ears ringing. "Doctor, what did you say? 3 months? Are you mistaken, doctor? I've been working far from home for exactly 6 months and haven't been back once. How could she be 3 months pregnant?" The doctor looked at him with a mix of sympathy and pity. He sighed softly, pulled a test result sheet from the medical file, and handed it to him. "This is the result of your blood work and general examination from when you registered your wife for emergency care earlier. The clinical results show that your body suffered severe damage in the past. To put it simply, Ethan, you will never be able to father a child." The test paper fluttered from Ethan's trembling hands down to the cold tiled floor. The truth was like a sledgehammer, smashing directly onto the top of his head, shattering all his arrogance, his delusions, and even the memories of his past life that were rewinding in his mind. So that was how it was. It turned out that in their previous life, the pregnancy Madison had brought to their door to force Lily into a divorce had also belonged to some unknown man. He had joyfully accepted the cuckold's horns, siding with Madison to abandon and shun Lily. He and his mother had humiliated Lily, calling her a useless parasite who couldn't bear children, shifting all the blame onto her just to cover up his own inadequacy. He had been so smug, thinking he had found a perfect, gentle woman who could bear an heir for his family. But the cruel truth exposed that the useless and defective one was him all along. Everything was just a spectacular scam, a pathetic farce in which he was the most foolish and blind main character. He had personally thrown away the only diamond who had treated him with sincerity and wholeheartedly supported him, only to bring home a broken, dirty, and deceitful shard of glass. In both lifetimes, he had lived within his own lies and the betrayal of the one he worshipped. Ethan stumbled out of the hospital. The gloomy afternoon sky suddenly unleashed a torrential downpour. He walked soullessly down the bustling street, letting the freezing rain lash against his face, washing away the last shred of dignity of a total loser. Suddenly, his footsteps stiffened. On a giant LED screen hanging in front of the city's largest shopping mall, a live news broadcast about the Global Economic Summit was playing. The camera zoomed in on the seating area of the heads of state. Sitting right next to the highest-ranking leader, in the very center of everyone's attention, was a female interpreter. She wore an exquisitely tailored black suit, her posture perfectly straight. Her hair was pulled up in a neat bun, revealing a sharp, composed face. Her voice rang out through the street's broadcasting speakers. Her intonation was perfect, her translation fluent, without a single extra or missing word. Radiating confidence and shining brilliantly under the flashing cameras of hundreds of international journalists, it was Lily. At the bottom corner of the screen, golden text scrolled across solemnly, "Senior Interpreter Lily." The television camera panned across the delegates' seats and stopped at the section reserved for scientists. Advisor Caleb wore an elegant gray suit, his back perfectly straight. The corners of his lips curved slightly into a gentle and proud smile as he looked at the girl shining on the podium. Two outstanding, perfect individuals sat in a position that Ethan, even if he reached out with all his might, could never touch the hems of their clothes in this lifetime. Ethan stared blankly at the screen. His eyes were bloodshot, and blue veins bulged on his forehead. Bitter tears mixed with the rain streaming down his cheeks. He clutched his head, dropped to his knees on the wet curb, and sobbed uncontrollably. His desperate, utterly remorseful screams were swallowed by the rushing honks of cars and the curtain of rain. Passers-by hurried past. No one paid any mind to a ruined man kneeling and crying by the roadside. He had forever lost the girl who had once stayed up all night preparing lessons for him. He had forever lost the ticket to step up to the peak that he could have clung to. He deserved it. The cruelest punishment was not death, but having to scrape a living at the bottom of society, watching helplessly as the person he once trampled upon stood at the peak of glory, dazzling and blinding, while clearly realizing that he himself was nothing but a destitute, tragic figure. The Global Economic Summit concluded with resounding success. Applause echoed throughout the vast auditorium. Lily packed her documents into her briefcase, smiling as she said goodbye to her colleagues and the diplomatic delegation. Just as she stepped through the magnificent marble corridor, she saw a familiar figure waiting by the tempered glass doors. In Caleb's hands, there were no cheesy bouquets of red roses or flashy gifts. He was holding a piping hot cup of black coffee, exactly her favorite flavor to dispel her sleepiness after hours of brain-straining work. Mission accomplished. Are you tired? Caleb stepped forward, the smile on his lips so warm that it dispelled all fatigue. He naturally took the heavy briefcase from her hand. Lily took the cup of coffee and took a sip. The slight bitterness on the tip of her tongue quickly melted into a sweet aftertaste in her throat, just like the taste of success after so many days of arduous training. Not tired, she looked up at him. The feeling of standing where I belong is wonderful. Caleb took her hand. His hand was large, warm, and incredibly steady, having never let go for the past 7 years. Let's go home then. With their fingers tightly intertwined, they walked out of the conference building, walking under the brilliant sunset of Capital City. The rhythmic tapping of their shoes on the asphalt road signaled a new journey, wide open and full of promise ahead. Lily never looked back at the past again. Those who had once wanted to break her wings had buried themselves under the ashes of jealousy, deceit, and ignorance. Life was not a boilerplate translation for others to arbitrarily grade or correct. This time, she held the pen herself, wrote her own answer herself, and that answer was flawlessly brilliant.
So satisfying. It really proves that investing in yourself always pays off. You don't owe anyone your time, and walking away from users is how you protect your worth. Plus, when you level up, you attract people who actually respect you, like Caleb. What was your favorite moment? Comment below, like, and subscribe. See you next time!